Palace, Manila. Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. extended the Philippines' condolences to Venezuela after a series of powerful earthquakes left dozens dead and hundreds injured. In a message posted Thursday, the president said he was deeply saddened by the destruction caused by the twin quakes and joined the international community in expressing concern for the Venezuelan people. President Marcos conveyed the Filipino nation's sympathies. The chief executive assured Venezuela of the Philippines' support as communities struggle with the aftermath of the disaster, adding that the country stands in solidarity with the Venezuelan people during this difficult time and hopes for the swift recovery of affected areas. Venezuela was struck Wednesday by a magnitude 7.2 earthquake near the city of Moron, followed just a minute later by a stronger magnitude 7.5 tremor. The quakes caused severe damage, including in the capital, Caracas. Authorities report at least 188 fatalities and more than 1,500 people injured as rescue and recovery operations continue.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Thursday inspected a flagship farm-to-table initiative in South Cotabato, highlighting the government's push to fight hunger while securing stable markets for local farmers. The president visited the rollout of the Department of Agriculture's Enhanced Partnership Against Hunger and Poverty, or EPAHP, and the Department of Social Welfare and Development's Walang Gutom Program, or WGP, which directly connect farmers to food-insecure families. President Marcos observed how the partnership streamlines the farm-to-table chain, ensuring farmers have guaranteed buyers for their produce while vulnerable households receive regular access to nutritious food. Government data show that 7,728 beneficiaries in South Cotabato are currently supported under the Walang Gutom program. Both EPAHP and WGP aim to strengthen food security by sourcing vegetables, rice, and other agricultural products straight from local farmers and cooperatives for distribution to food-poor communities. The administration targets to assist 600,000 food-poor households under the Walang Gutom program this year, with plans to expand coverage to 750,000 households by 2027.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said direct funding for local governments has improved project delivery and strengthened accountability at the community level. Speaking at the launch of the Bawat Bayan Makikinabang program in Coronadal City, President Marcos said reforms in the Local Government Support Fund, or LGSF, now allow resources to go straight to mayors and governors, removing discretionary bottlenecks that once limited access to national funds. The president said local government units, or LGUs, are better positioned to identify local needs and are directly answerable to the public if projects fall short. He added that closer coordination between national agencies and LGUs has led to faster, more responsive service delivery. During the event, the chief executive turned over 40 million pesos in Socio-Civic Projects Fund assistance to South Cotabato and 96 million pesos to Cotabato Province. President Marcos also met with scholars, barangay officials, and local leaders.
Kaya't ang ginawa po natin, ang LGSF, at dinerecho na po natin sa ating mga gobernador, sa ating mga mayor, para meron silang magamit para sa mga kanilang mga inisyatibo. Kasama po dyan sa proyekto yan, yung ating ibinibigay na bigas, na tigsa 10 kilo na sako ng bigas para sa mga nangangailangan ng tulong dahil hindi sila nakakatiyak sa kanilang pagkain sa araw-araw. Yan po ang aming inuna. Yung pong listahan na yun, kung sino ang mabibigyan ng Local Government Support Fund, sino ang sino ang mabibigyan ng bigas, ay kinuha po natin sa mga mayor, kinuha po natin sa mga barangay chairman at sa mga gobernador upang matiyak na kasi kung idadaan po natin sa national government ulit, alam nyo naman pagka dumaan sa national, magpapadala pa kami ng tao, mag-a-assess sila, mag-i-interview sila, napakatagal. Sabi ko nga, nang naging karanasan ko bilang gobernador, sabi, hindi nyo na kailangan mag-assess. In-assess na namin yan sa local. Alam na namin yan. Nasa file na namin. Araw-araw namin tinitingnan yung file na yan. Kaya hingiin nyo na lang sa local government. Iyon ang aming ginawa. Binigay na lang namin yung pondo sa local government. At sabi ko sa kanila, kayo na ang bahala. Kayo na ang bahala dahil ako'y nakakatiyak. At sabi ko naman, mas nakakasiguro ako na hindi magiging kagaya ng mga flood control na alanganin. Dahil ang mga local government, pag hindi magandang trabaho, sisitahin ninyo lahat. Pupuntahan kayo, kakatukin kayo sa bahay ninyo, at sasabihin bakit yung project ninyo walang kwenta. Yun ang safety, kaya malakas ang loob ko na magbigay sa ating mga local government. Dahil alam ko na nakabantay ang taong bayan, at alam ko naman, ang mga local government ay talagang tapat sa kanilang serbisyo sa tao.
That was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
In the meantime, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. assured earthquake-hit communities in Mindanao that government aid will continue and reach families faster under improved disaster response systems. Speaking in Coronadal City, President Marcos said the government has shifted from relief to full recovery, with affected residents now receiving cash assistance to help rebuild homes that were totally or partially damaged. The President highlighted reforms in the Quick Response Fund, or QRF, which now allows local governments to conduct their own assessments, speeding up the release of support. He said 20 million pesos was immediately deployed for urgent needs, especially housing repairs. President Marcos emphasized that quicker coordination between national agencies and LGUs has shortened response times and strengthened on-the-ground assistance. The chief executive vowed sustained support for families recovering from the magnitude 7.8 earthquake in southern Mindanao, with financial aid coursed through the Department of Social Welfare and Development's Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situation or IX program.
Kaya't pagdeklara ng state of calamity, na ibaba namin kaagad ang QRF. Ang QRF tawag yan Quick Response Fund. At 20 million kaagad ang naipadala namin para magamit para sa mga kagamitan na mga pangangailangan, lalong-lalo na yung mga nasira na mga bahay at na-evacuate, napunta sila sa mga evacuation center. At tiniyak namin na yung DSWD ay dumating kaagad at saka DOH para tignan kung ano yung mga pangangailangan ng ating mga kababayan. At ito kaagad ay aming binigyan ng tulong. Hanggang ngayon, galing lang kami sa isang walang gutom program. Kasama ko si Secretary Rex Gatchalian ng DSWD at naghiwalay kami. Babalik na naman siya babalik yata siya sa GLAN para tignan ulit kung ano nang kalagayan ng ating mga evacuees. Dahil kahit wala ng lindol at kailangan natin i-assess yung mga iba't ibang infrastruktura, yung mga pwede pang gamitin, yung mga hindi na pwedeng gamitin, ano pa yung mga pangangailangan. Sa kasalukuyan, nagbibigay na tayo ng cash transfer dahil tapos na yung relief phase at nakapasok na tayo, nakapagbigay tayo ng mga pagpapakain. Yung mga nasaktan ay nabigyan na nagpatingin na sa ating mga medical team at meron ngayon ngayon para makabalik ang ating mga kababayang nasira ang bahay, either kahit totally destroyed o partially destroyed, yung pong binibigay po natin na cash para may magamit sila, pampabili ng gamit para maipatayo uli yung bahay nila o maayos nila yung kanilang mga nasirang bahay. Kaya asahan po ninyo, patuloy po natin ginagawa. Pinalitan din natin yung sistema ng QRF. Dati, Quick Response Fund, pero 1 taon bago mo makita. Kaya pinalitan namin yung sistema para mas mabilis ang pagbaba ng QRF. At ang assessment, ginagawa na ngayon ng CDO. Dahil yung CDO, imbis na mag-antay ng team galing sa Maynila para mag-assess kung ano yung kailangan gawin at saan dadalhin yung QRF, ay ginamit na namin yung mga CDO dahil sila'y nandyan na. So yung mga report nila, yun ang ginagamit namin kung saan pupunta yung QRF. Kaya napabilis ang ating pagbaba. Kaya asahan po ninyo na patuloy ang ating pagtulong sa lahat ng mga nadamay at naging biktima ng napakalakas na lindol.
Was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Thursday, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. traveled to Sultan Kudarat to meet farmers who have endured years of hardship after the 2021 rains destroyed the old Antong Dam and crippled irrigation across the province. The president recalled how non-stop rainfall eroded the dam's foundation beyond repair, leaving communities dependent on rain, wells, and shrinking river sources and forcing harvests to drop. President Marcos said this experience, combined with a 90% chance of El Nino, pushed him to order the Department of Agriculture and the National Irrigation Administration, or NIA, to fast-track irrigation projects nationwide. Reliable water, he stressed, is the key to better harvests and stronger food security. The president then led the opening of the rehabilitated Antong Dam, where the West Gate has been activated to restore water flow. The project will irrigate 1,563 hectares immediately, with another 700 hectares to follow once new canals are built. This, he said, will boost production of rice, corn, vegetables, and other crops, and restore the traditional 2 cropping cycles lost after the disaster. President Marcos Jr. also highlighted a new footbridge built by NIA, an addition not originally planned but constructed after engineers saw how many residents and students crossed the creek daily. He described it as one of the finest footbridges he has seen. The chief executive said the dam's rehabilitation is a commitment to protect farmers, strengthen agriculture, and ensure communities are better prepared for future climate challenges.
Ngayon naman, ay sinasabihan po tayo nung ating na binibigay sa ating mga datos na meron tayong hinaharap na mga sabi nila siyam na po 90% ang possibility na magkakaroon po tayo ng El Nino. Kaya't ibig sabihin, pagka nangyari uli yan, harap na naman tayo sa tagtuyot. at balik na naman tayo sa dating problema. Kaya sinabi ko sa Department of Agriculture, sinabi ko sa NIA, ay bilisan na ninyo ang pagpatayo ng ating mga irrigation system. Kagaya po ng sabi ni Eddie Guillen, wala po, hindi lang po ito. Lahat sa buong Pilipinas nagtatayo po tayo ng ganito upang ang mga magsasaka ay mas maganda ang magiging ani. At yung ibang lugar na 2 beses lang nagtatanim sa isang taon, nakakapag-3 na planting na. Kaya napakalaking bagay yon, hindi lamang para sa hanap buhay ng ating mga magsasaka, kundi pati rin para sa food supply ng ating mga kababayan. Kailangan mas mabilis, mas malawak at mas matibay pa ang pagtayo ng mga dam ng irigasyon upang mapalakas ang agrikultura at makamit ang sapat na supply ng pagkain sa ating mga kababayan. Kaya nandito po ako ngayon, nandito po tayong lahat upang formal na buksan ang ang rehabilitation project ng Antong Dam at masimulaan na natin. Kaya yung po ang ginawa namin, binuksan na po namin yung waste gate para dumaloy na ang tubig. Mayroong higit sa 1,500 na ektarya ang nalupang sakahan ang mapapatubigan nito. At kagaya ng nabanggit, mayroon pang expansion, magtatayo pa ng kanal na ilang kilometro na ilalagay pa na kanal. Mga ganun, para sa karagdagan 700 hectares na papatubigan. Magkakaroon ng sapat na supply ng tubig. Mapapataas natin ang produksyon ng palay, ng saging, ng pakwan, gulay, mais, at iba't ibang mga pananim. Ang pinakamahalaga sa lahat ay maibalik na natin ang dating 2 beses na pagtanim kada taon. Ngayon, meron na tayong maasahan na patubig sa inyong mga sakahan. Dahil sa mga maraming residente at mag-aaral dito ay kailangan tumawid at dumadaan dito, sinama na rin nila itong tulay. Wala po sa project yan. Nung una namin nakita yung project, wala pong pinag-uusapan na tulay. Nagulat nga ako, pagdating ko rito, may tulay na eh. Dahil inisyatibo na lang ng NIA yan at ginawa nila. At isa na sa pinakamagandang footbridge ito na nakita ko sa buong Pilipinas.
Was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos led the distribution of free rice to around 500 families in Santa Cruz, Manila on Thursday, continuing the 4th straight day of her Mula sa Puso para sa Pamilya outreach across Metro Manila. Residents from 10 barangays in Zone 38, District 3 were among the beneficiaries. Speaking to the crowd, the First Lady relayed President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s gratitude for the community's support and reaffirmed the administration's commitment to easing the burden on vulnerable households. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno and Vice Mayor Ley Atienza joined the activity, thanking the national government for extending assistance to senior citizens, persons with disabilities, solo parents, and other low-income residents. The rice distributed was procured by the Manila City government directly from local farmers through the Local Government Support Fund, ensuring both community aid and support for the agricultural sector. Barangay officials and beneficiaries expressed appreciation, including 62-year-old former Barangay 375 Councilor Josephine Casipit, who said the assistance is a big help, especially for elderly residents.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang is pushing back against claims that the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte will derail investigations into the alleged flood control scam, saying anti-corruption efforts across government remain fully active. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said inquiries by the National Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice, and the Office of the Ombudsman are ongoing, underscoring that the administration has not shifted its focus away from accountability. Responding to remarks from Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, Castro questioned the suggestion that the impeachment trial would overshadow other investigations. She stressed that the executive branch remains focused on governance and project implementation, noting that impeachment is not discussed in cabinet meetings. Castro added that government agencies continue to carry out their mandates independently, while the Senate performs its constitutional role as an impeachment court. She also emphasized that probes into alleged anomalies, including controversial flood control projects, will proceed alongside other oversight mechanisms.
Sino naman ang po nagsabi sa kanya na magkakaroon lang ng focus sa impeachment trial ni Vice Presidente? Nakita na po natin kung paano gumalaw ang NBI, ang Ombudsman, ang DOJ. Siguro po, total mahilig naman po siya mag-SOCMED. Busy siya sa Facebook. Siguro makikita naman po niya yung mga updates kung ano nangyayari, kung paano gumagalaw at nagtatrabaho ang gobyerno para mapanagot ang dapat na mapanagot at hindi po focus sa impeachment trial. Sa totoo, pag nagmi-meeting po ang Pangulo with the Cabinet Secretaries, hindi po na pag-uusapan ng impeachment. So saan po kaya hinuhugot ng dating Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano ang kanyang mga kwento? Siguro sa susunod po, tanungin nyo, kaya lang puro Facebook yata po siya, no? So hindi siya matatanong. Siguro pagka nagkaroon ng pagkakataon, tanungin siya, saan niya kinukuha yung mga kwento niya?
That was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang is welcoming remarks from International Criminal Court or ICC judges warning against the spread of misinformation in the case involving former President Rodrigo Duterte, saying the development affirms the government's long-standing concerns over false narratives surrounding the proceedings. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the ICC's comments show that the issue of disinformation is not being raised by the Philippine government alone. She alleged that much of the misinformation tied to the ICC case has been coming from Duterte's camp. Castro also said it was appropriate for the ICC to call out former lead defense counsel Nicholas Kaufman over statements made outside the courtroom, adding that his previous remarks against the administration were politically motivated. The palace's statement follows an ICC status conference where presiding judge Joanna Corner flagged the proliferation of misleading information about the Duterte case and reminded all parties to exercise caution in their public statements.
Naging makabuluhan po ang ipinahayag ng ICC dahil nakita po natin na hindi lamang po tayo ang nakakakita at nakakapansin ng pagkalat ng fake news. At karamihan dito po ay talaga nanggagaling sa kampo ng mga Duterte, lalong-lalo na patungkol dito sa kaso sa ICC. Tama-tama lang po na na-call out si Atty. Kaufman dahil ang kanyang mga ipinapahayag ay pawang walang basihan, puro paninira sa gobyerno, na hindi naman makakatulong sa depensa ng kanyang kliyente. So, nakikita po natin kung ang mga pinapahayag ni Atty. Kaufman noon ay puro pamumulitika lamang.
That was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is heartbroken over the recent surge in school-related violence involving minors, following a series of incidents that have alarmed parents and authorities. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president was deeply distressed after the deadly school shooting in Tacloban City. noting that both the suspects and victims were children. She added that another planned attack in Tolosa, Leyte, allegedly involving a 14-year-old, was foiled, while a separate stabbing incident in San Carlos City has heightened concerns about a possible pattern of youth violence. Castro said the administration considers these incidents unacceptable, especially with minors increasingly involved in violent acts. She said the president has ordered agencies to determine the root causes of the trend, including the possible influence of violent gaming apps and copycat behavior. The palace emphasized the need to strengthen protection and guidance for young people. Castro also said the government remains open to discussions on proposals to lower the age of criminal liability, but stressed that any measure would undergo careful study once a bill is formally filed. The renewed focus on juvenile justice comes amid growing public concern over violence inside and around schools.
Ang mga mararahas na nangyayari sa ating bansa ay hindi na po katanggap-tanggap. Mas lalo na po kung kabataan ang nasasangkot. Nung nabalitaan nga po ng Pangulo ang nangyari sa Tacloban, ay heartbroken, masasabi natin, ang naramdaman ng Pangulo dahil mga bata ang lumalabas na kaya na gumawa ng krimen, kayang magplanong gumawa ng krimen, at mga inosenteng mga kabataan din ang nabibiktima. Mas maganda po ngayon na mapakita talaga natin kung paano ba natin inaalagaan ang ating mga kabataan at hindi po siguro nararapat na isantabi o hindi pansinin ang mga ganitong pangyayari. So, iniuutos din po ng Pangulo ang agarang pag-determine ano ang nagiging ugat nito. Maliban po sa nakita ng Pangulo na may kinalaman ng ibang mga gaming apps na marahas, so dapat makita po talaga kung saan nagbumula ito, kung nagkakaroon ba ng panggagaya, nagiging parang normal ang ganitong klase ng kaharasan. So, yun po, ipinag-uutos po ng Pangulo ang lahat ng dapat na gawin ng mga concerned agencies para po maiwasan ang mga ganitong klaseng kaharasan, lalo-lalo na sa eskwelahan, sa mga kabataan.
As Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says the government is expanding its feeding and nutrition programs as child stunting continues to rise nationwide. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said Thursday, the Marcos Jr. administration recognizes that stunting is a long-standing problem and has already rolled out interventions to address it. She cited President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive to establish more child development centers and daycare facilities to strengthen early childhood nutrition. Castro reported that the Department of Education's school-based feeding program for 2026 to 2027 has a 25.6 billion peso budget and is expected to benefit 4.63 million learners. The program will also extend feeding days from 120 to 200 days to ensure sustained nutrition support. Beneficiaries include kinder to grade 1 learners under the Universal Feeding Program, undernourished students from grades 2 to 6, and pregnant adolescent and other vulnerable learners beyond grade 6. Castro added that the Department of Social Welfare and Development continues to implement its own feeding initiatives, including the Walang Gutom program and the Supplemental Feeding Program, which serves about 1.8 million children in local government unit or LGU-run development centers and supervised neighborhood play groups. Children aged 3 to 5 receive meals for up to 180 days. She said the expanded coverage and longer feeding cycles reflect the government's effort to confront persistent malnutrition. Data from the Food and Nutrition Research Institute show child stunting among those under 5 rose to 25.3% in 2025.
Hindi ito kahapon lang naging problema. Alam ng Pangulo ang problemang ito, kaya nga po siya nung nakaraang taon ay nag-utos na magpatayo ng child development centers at mga daycare centers. At ang DepEd po sa ngayon ay meron pong programa, ang School-Based Feeding Program for 2026 to 2027, na meron pong budget ng 25.6 billion para malabanan ang kagutuman sa mga kabataang mag-aaral. Ang mabibinipisyohan po nito ay aabot po sa 4.63 million learners nationwide. At mas pinahaba na po ang araw para sila po ay makatanggap ng masustansyang pagkain. Aabot na po sa 200 days. Mas mahaba po kumpara sa nakaraang taon na 120 days. At ang mabibiyaan po nito para sa universal feeding ay ang kinder to grade 1. At ang mga undernourished learners naman po para sa grade 2 to grade 6, kasama na rin po ang pregnant adolescent learners, vulnerable and marginalized students na beyond grade 6. Maliban po dyan ay meron din pong programa ang DSWD para unang-una walang gutom program at ang supplemental feeding program na ang target naman po ay 1.8 million children enrolled in LGU-run child development centers and supervised neighborhood play. Ito po ay sa buong bansa po ipapatupad ng DSWD. So, dito naman po, 180 days feeding days ang maibibigay natin sa mga 3 hanggang 5 taong mga bata.
That was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says the Marcos Jr. administration is banking on stronger infrastructure spending to help lift the economy in the second half of 2026, after economic managers trimmed the country's growth outlook amid global and domestic pressures. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said infrastructure disbursements slowed earlier this year as the government carefully reviewed projects linked to alleged flood control anomalies. She noted that the cautious approach contributed to softer growth despite efforts to speed up project implementation. Castro added that external shocks, particularly the ongoing Middle East crisis, continue to weigh on the economy. She also pointed to domestic political noise as another factor affecting performance. Despite these challenges, the palace remains optimistic. Castro said higher infrastructure spending under Budget Secretary Kim De Leon is expected to stimulate activity in the coming months, with economic managers projecting a stronger rebound in the second half of the year. The Development Budget Coordination Committee recently lowered its 2026 Gross Domestic Product or GDP growth forecast to 3.5% to 4.5%, down from the previous 5 to 6% target.
Ang nangyari po kasi dito, dahil meron tayong kinaharap na global oil crisis at yun po ang nakikita ng economic team natin kung bakit nagkaroon ng ganitong sitwasyon. Pero ang sabi naman po ni DBM Secretary Kim De Leon, kailangan na po talagang gumastos ng gobyerno. Nakita din po kasi ang pag-iingat naman ng sobra ng DBM sa nakaraang taon dahil nga dito sa mga maanumalyang flood control projects. So hindi agad gumastos ang gobyerno, pinag-aralan mabuti at hindi basta-basta inilabas ang pondo. Isa po ito sa naging dahilan kung bakit medyo umina po ang growth ng ekonomiya ng bansa. So ngayon, sa pamumuno po ni Secretary Kim De Leon, maliban po sa pag-iingat, kailangan na po talagang gumastos lalong-lalo na sa infrastruktura. Lumiit po kasi ang gastos sa infrastruktura because of the issues on the flood control mess.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Energy, or DOE, is keeping a close watch on domestic fuel prices as global tensions, particularly in the Middle East, continue to drive volatility in the oil market, Malacañang said Thursday. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro told reporters the Marcos Jr. administration has been monitoring price movements since the start of the crisis to ensure that local pump prices reflect international market conditions. She said President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has directed the DOE to maintain strict oversight. According to Castro, the DOE has reiterated that fuel prices in the Philippines are based solely on global market benchmarks. She added that authorities remain alert for any irregularities and may issue show-cause orders to oil companies found violating pricing regulations. Castro's remarks came after questions on whether the Philippines would follow the United States in probing alleged gasoline price gauging amid the ongoing Middle East conflict. Oil firms implemented a major rollback on Tuesday, with gasoline prices dropping by 3 pesos and 90 centavos to 5 pesos and 90 centavos per liter, diesel by 9 pesos to 11 pesos, and kerosene by 9 pesos and 82 centavos to 11 pesos and 82 centavos. Castro assured the public that the government will continue monitoring global developments and their impact on local fuel costs.
Tagal na pong ginagawa ito. Unang araw pa lang po na nagkaroon ng krisis sa Middle East. Yan na po ang inuutos ng Pangulo sa DOE. At tayo naman po, according to DOE, ang presyo po ng ating fuel ay base lamang sa international market price. At ito po ay tinututukan ng DOE at nabanggit na rin po natin noon na kapag po lumalabag ay nagbibigay po sila ng show cause order.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. paid tribute on Thursday to Filipino seafarers, recognizing their vital role in sustaining global trade and supporting millions of families, even as they face growing risks from geopolitical tensions affecting major shipping routes. In his message for the 2026 Day of the Seafarer, the President highlighted the contribution of Filipino mariners to the movement of people, goods, and economies worldwide. He noted that their work keeps international supply chains functioning and strengthens the country's economy through remittances and overseas employment. This year's theme, Carrying World Trade, Carrying the Risks, underscores the challenges confronting seafarers as conflicts and instability continue to disrupt maritime corridors, including those in the Middle East. President Marcos emphasized that Filipino seafarers continue to perform their duties despite heightened security concerns in these areas. The President also acknowledged the sacrifices of seafarers' families, many of whom endure long periods of separation while their loved ones work at sea. The Day of the Seafarer, observed every June 25th, is an annual International Maritime Organization initiative recognizing the global contribution of maritime workers. The Philippines remains one of the world's top sources of maritime labor, with Filipinos accounting for nearly a quarter of the global seafaring workforce. President Marcos Jr. said the government, through the Department of Migrant Workers and maritime industry partners, is strengthening measures to protect the rights, safety, and welfare of Filipino seafarers. The President also underscored the need to equip them with updated skills as the maritime sector adapts to rapid technological changes and evolving international standards.
I extend my warmest greetings to all Filipino seafarers around the world as we celebrate the International Day of the Seafarer. Every day, across the world's oceans and maritime corridors, Filipino seafarers perform vital work that promotes the movement of people and keeps global trade moving and economies connected. With great skill and dedication, they ensure that passengers and economically important goods reach their destinations safely, while supporting the livelihoods of millions of Filipino families. This year's theme, Carrying World Trade, Carrying the Risks, recognizes the realities faced by those who serve at sea. Amidst geopolitical tensions and uncertainties affecting international shipping, our seafarers continue to carry out their duties with courage and resolve that reach beyond the vessels that they serve. Your contributions help strengthen the Philippine economy and uphold the reputation of the Filipino worker across the world. We likewise recognize the families who stand behind every seafarer. Their unwavering support makes possible the invaluable service that our mariners render far from home. As the maritime industry continues to evolve through technological innovation and changing global standards, we must ensure that Filipino seafarers remain equipped with the knowledge and the skills necessary to thrive in a rapidly changing world. Together with the Department of Migrant Workers and our partners in the maritime sector, the government continues to strengthen measures that safeguard the rights, safety, and well-being of Filipino seafarers. On this International Day of the Seafarer, we honor your service, recognize your sacrifices, and express our gratitude for all that you do for our country.
That was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our post as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.